A reading from Lamentations chapter 3, verses 25 to 32. God proves to be good to the man who passionately waits, to the woman who diligently seeks. It is a good thing to quietly hope for help from God. It's a good thing when you're young to stick it out through the hard times. When life is heavy and hard to take, go off by yourself, enter the silence, bow in prayer. Don't ask questions, wait for hope to appear. Don't run from trouble, take it full face. The worst is never the worst. Why? Because the master won't ever walk out and fail to return. If he works severely, he also works tenderly. His stockpiles of loyal love are immense. This is the word of the Lord.
Good morning. The settling starts right after supper and continues in various ways right up until bedtime. I don't have time to give you all the details, but let me share the highlights. My name is Carolyn Klassen. I'm a proud Oma, and I'm delighted to be here with you this morning.
Happy Mother's Day, Carolyn.
Thank you. My 3-year-old grandson is adorable and fun and funny, and he's a handful. To get Bobo, that's my nickname for him, ready for bed, well, it starts right after supper with very active play because he needs to burn off energy. At the appointed time, his parents will say to him, 10 more minutes until bedtime, and then they will give him a snack and some milk, and then they'll say 3 minutes until bedtime, and then it's time to go upstairs. He doesn't want to go. And Mom will say, it's time for a bath. And he really doesn't want to go. To make the transition, she'll say, do you want to play What Time Is It, Mr. Wolf? And he scampers right up to the top of the stairs, and she'll say, what time is it, Mr. Wolf? And he'll say something like, 14 o'clock. And then she'll run up a few stairs, and she'll ask that question a couple more times until she's at the top of the stairs. And then they will go in and have a bath. They will brush his teeth. And trust me, this is not an efficient process. This takes extra time. Then I can hear him picking his pajamas up from the drawer. Then stories. And he has carefully negotiated how many stories, and he's always trying to get them higher. And then a song. Last week, I watched him pre-negotiate 2 songs instead of 1 during snack time. They heat up this little tiny beanbag bear that he has in the microwave so it's nice and warm so he can snuggle with it while he falls asleep. And then the other parent will go up to give him a hug and kiss. And then they both hug and kiss him again, and then once more. They remind him about how much they love him, and they talk about turning off the light, and they talk about how they'll be close by. And then he'll ask them all those questions again, and they will answer. And then they'll walk out of the door and close it, and then they'll come downstairs, and then you can hear him yell. And his dad from the bottom of the stairs will go, I love you. And then he'll yell once more, and he'll say it again, I love you. It's about 3 or 4 times. And then he settles off very easily and nicely to sleep. He's 3. He's strong and strong-willed, and he's amazing. And you cannot make Bobo go to bed just because it's time. He must be settled into bed. His body must be fed and hydrated, and he has to be feeling absolutely safe and loved. If you make him go to bed, he'll fight you. If you wind him down, make him feel safe and relaxed, and slow him down enough, he'll settle right down into sleep very smoothly. Now, does this sound like a lot of work for a little boy's sleep time? Needless? Silly even? If you're saying yes, you have probably forgot what it's like to be 3. When the dark is scary, when it's hard to be alone in your room, where you fear any shampoo in your eyes might actually blind you permanently, where you have big feelings and lots of energy and Oma and Opa are over and nobody else has to go to bed but you do. It's hard and scary and difficult to settle down for rest when you're 3. We're looking at Psalm 23 this week, and we are going to be looking at verses 2 and 3. And as I've been hanging out with the verses in today's text over these last weeks, I have been watching this evening progression settling down Bobo into bedtime when we are there for dinner. 3-year-old children and sheep have a lot in common. Sheep are timid and they're easily frightened. They are defenseless. They cannot bite, they don't have claws, and they can be easily outrun. Without the shepherd, sheep, just like 3-year-olds without parents, are in serious danger. I've been watching sheep videos these last couple weeks to learn about sheep behavior. I last spoke on Palm Sunday where I got to do donkey research, so I'm kind of making my way through the barn. And as I've been watching shepherds talk and demonstrate about how to lay down sheep, let me tell you, when you make a sheep lie down, they fight you. There's a technique, but it basically involves twisting their neck, grabbing this, and kind of flipping them over. It's basically strategic wrestling. I borrowed a book called The Good Shepherd, and it's written by Dr. Kenneth Bailey from a friend. And he is a writer who also wrote the book, Jesus Through Middle Eastern Eyes. He has this unique and authentic Middle Eastern take on the words of Psalm 23. And Bailey writes that the translation of, "He makes me lie down in green pastures," actually mischaracterizes the intent of this text. Bailey writes, "A dog can be trained to sit and lie down, not so a sheep. A well-known proverb affirms, you can lead a horse to water, but you cannot make him drink. In like manner, no one can make a sheep lie down. Sheep will only lie down when they've had plenty to eat, have quenched their thirst, are not threatened by any wild animals, or disturbed by biting insects." He goes on to say that when they translate the Old Testament in Greek, it uses the word kataskanao, since the time, and the King James Version translated into English as make, but the more accurate translation of kataskanao is actually settle down or rest. So Bailey says a more accurate translation of "he makes me lie down in green pastures" is actually "he settles me down in green pastures." Sheep and 3-year-olds, they have a lot in common in that they both need to be settled, not forced. And here's the thing. I'm reluctant to admit it, but I have a lot of inner 3-year-old or sheepness inside of me. You can't make me settle down either. When I'm ramped up, someone ordering me to chill doesn't actually work. Nice idea. I wish it worked, but it doesn't. The anxiety or revved upness is actually in my body, and it's beyond simply ordering it to do something different. My anxiety, when it spirals up, if I'm ordered to calm down, or if I internally yell at myself to chill, it actually has this reverse effect. Now I'm even more anxious for being yelled at, or I'm mad that someone is making me do something that I don't want to do, or that I don't know how to do, or I simply cannot do. Or I get upset because the fact that I'm not responding to the calm down feeling has me feel like a loser and a failure, and that even adds more to that anxious feeling. Maybe you too. If I'm worked up and nervous about a deadline, or Jim and I haven't agreed on something, sleep doesn't come easy. If I have a speaking thing come up, or say, like a Sunday morning teach, I have trouble sticking to my computer to do the research and to write efficiently and effectively. My anxiety has me procrastinate, I empty the dishwasher, I avoid, I walk around aimlessly, and I find other tasks that will distract. Or I go watch sheep videos. Lots and lots of sheep videos. And I call it sermon research. So it looks a little more sophisticated and nuanced, but we grown-ups, we don't chill and lie down on command either. We are an unsettled bunch living in a challenging world, and God understands that we need settling, which is why the psalm continues with the next line in our text. He leads me beside still waters. Again, let me tell you about sheep behavior. This line is loaded with meaning. He leads me beside still waters, because sheep don't like moving water. They don't drink from brooks or streams. Still water only. So the shepherd goes ahead of the sheep to find a water source, which during some times of the year in the Holy Land can be few and far between. So once the shepherd finds the water source, he has to figure out how to make it still. In some more common watering holes, there may be shallow rocks that have sort of divots hollowed out that you can put water into to drink. But if there aren't any of those around, the sheep will actually create a side stream off of the main stream and sort of dig out a little pond so that that water can go into that pond and collect and be still. The point is this: sheep are high maintenance when it comes to water, and the shepherd does what is needed to take care of them. And he leads them next to the still water. He doesn't drive them or herd them. The sheep stay near the shepherd because they choose to. They know the call and they follow the shepherd because the shepherd is known and trusted. I watched videos where tourists called sheep with the shepherd's call and nothing happened. The sheep just remained out there. When the shepherd called, their ears instantly perked up and they came. The shepherd will have this distinctive call. It will be a couple of words with distinct tones. Some will choose to play that same short tune on a pipe. Eric F.F. Bishop tells this story. During the riots in Palestine in the middle 1930s, a village near Haifa was condemned to collective punishment by having its sheep and cattle sequestrated by the government. The inhabitants, however, were permitted to redeem their possessions at a fixed price. Among them was an orphan shepherd boy whose 6 or 8 sheep and goats were all he had in the world for life and work. Somehow he obtained the money for their redemption. He went to the big enclosure where the animals were penned, offering his money to the British sergeant in charge. The NCO, non-commissioned officer, told him he was welcome to the requisite number of animals, but he ridiculed the idea that he could possibly pick out his little flock amongst the confiscated hundreds. The little shepherd thought differently because he knew better, and he gave them his own call, for he had his nigh, his shepherd's pipe, with him, and his own separated from the rest of the animals and trotted after him. I am the good shepherd and know my sheep, and my sheep know me. The sheep know their shepherd by the distinctive call and follow that call into stillness. Safety and calm exist by listening to the call of the shepherd. What is the melody, the chorus, the verse, the call of the shepherd in your life? Many of us spent the last 2 days listening to Steve Bell talk and sing here, yesterday and the day before. An album that he put out years ago called Solace was in my CD player for a couple of years after my husband left. I played it over and over whenever I was in the car by myself because it was the shepherd's voice in my life during that hard time. There was a time when we had a case conference with lawyers and a judge to negotiate separation matters, and I was terrified with a capital T. I arrived plenty early downtown to make sure I could get a parking space and be at the appointed room on time. And in those 10 minutes that I had in the car, because I was so early before going into the meeting, that I had feared for months, I played one of Steve Bell's songs about 3 or 4 times on repeat before I went in. It was the voice of the shepherd whispering in my ear, I'm here, I'm protecting you, it'll be okay. Listen.
And God our protector, keep us in mind and always give strength to your people. For if we could be with you one day in time, it is better than 1,000 without you. It is better than 1,000 without you. And
I love that song, and it's meant so much to me. It's the call of the shepherd. Monica, what song is the song of the call of the shepherd for you?
it's funny because I play a lot of music and I'm surrounded by
Yeah.
noise all the time,
All the
right?
time.
And so for me, the call of the shepherd is more like when I go for a walk and I hear the birds chirping, or I'm in my room, which is in the basement corner of my house. So I have my quiet space and I just put on something that sounds like this, so it's kind of boring, but it just creates an atmosphere where I feel like me and God connect. So yeah, it's not really a song, which is interesting, but
Well, and I love that I have a certain song and you have a certain way too of hearing the voice of the shepherd.
yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks for asking, Carolyn.
So, some of you instantly know your song that feels like the call of the shepherd. You listen to it on repeat for months or years when the fear or the depression roll in and you are looking to hear the call of the shepherd. What I'm going to ask you to do is to text in that song to the Q&R phone, and you'll see the phone number come up periodically. There it is. And maybe the artist that sings it. And what we're going to do is Chelsea in the office is going to put it on a playlist. And if you go to YouTube and you put in the meeting place in the search engine, you'll see our channel come up, and you'll see a row at the top of options, and there is an option that says playlists. If you click on that playlist, there will be songs of the shepherd. And what we're going to do is we're going to create a TMP list of songs of the shepherd so that some of you who might not know what your song is, you can hear what other people's are, and then you can we all have a chance to listen in on what other people's songs of the shepherd are. I put in mine already, and I put in a couple of my favorite sheep videos too. Okay, thank you. So reading Bailey, please text your songs in. So reading Bailey's book, I discovered a bit more about this legendary green grass that the psalmist is writing about. It's a beautiful picture to have a sheep feel so contented that it chooses to settle down in the green pasture nearby still water. Here's the thing about herding sheep in this part of the world. In order to get to that meadow with the green pastures, the sheep and the shepherd have not had an easy time of it. They've had to navigate narrow paths, gorges, steep climbing hills with drop-offs, dangerously low and dark parts of a gully, and always the threat of wild animals intent on harm. And this green grass, this luxurious meadow, it exists in that part of the world for only about 3 months of the year. So it is beautiful, but precious, not year-round. For much of the year, there are dry tufts of scattered grass. This is difficult terrain in this part of the world. And reading this got me to thinking about life and anxiety and settling down in green grass beside still waters in light of a new book that has recently come out by Jonathan Haidt called The Anxious Generation, which looks at skyrocketing anxiety levels in our world, especially in adolescence. Haidt writes about startling trends with screen-based childhoods rather than play-based childhoods, with parents who sincerely want to protect their children from harm. So we make our playgrounds safer. We don't let kids play outside without supervision. We make rules and supervise kids at recess so they don't have a chance to navigate and negotiate differences on their own. We organize play dates and put them on teams, and we drive them to and from. Parents take their kids on bike rides rather than having them go off with their friends on adventures without adult supervision, as happened even a couple of decades ago. There is precious little unsupervised opportunity for kids to try things out without parents keeping them safe. And what Haidt writes is that the research indicates that we end up increasing anxiety as we seek to keep our kids safe. Let me explain. But first, let me ask a seemingly random but very related question. Remember the biosphere that was constructed in the Arizona desert in the late 1980s? Scientists wanted to see if the self-contained bubble, or series of bubbles, of soil and plants and oxygen and water and people could sustain themselves without any interaction from the outside world. Now, it failed for a variety of reasons, but one specific failure was that the trees in the biodome fell over and died. So this is the question. Why did the trees in the biodome fail? Why did they die? Not too much carbon dioxide? No wind. Exactly. Wind. There was no wind in the biodome, Wind stresses trees in ways that change the chemistry and structure of the wood to allow it to get stronger. It challenges the root system to expand for firmer anchoring. Without wind, trees fall over under the weight of themselves. Often we think of items being either fragile, like a wine glass, knock it over and it shatters, or non-fragile. You could throw these glasses against a wall and they wouldn't break. But humans, we're not fragile or not fragile. Humans, like trees, are anti-fragile, which means we need challenge in order to grow. As we meet the challenges of life, we develop capacity. Stress is good for us. Our immune systems need to meet germs, dirt, parasites, and bacteria in order to set a human being up for health. Playground structures need to allow kids to get strong muscles and better coordination, and also to learn judgment about what happens when you try something that is too far beyond you. Arguments increase our ability to navigate complex relationships. Learning to tolerate anxiety isn't a bad thing. Haidt argues it is necessary for life. The anxiety of a grade 3 spelling test sets you up for university exams, which sets you up for one day, perhaps, needing to handle a medical emergency for your child. We grow by being challenged in real life with supportive care of others who teach us how to handle the discomfort of stress. Haidt's book highlights how we, created in God's image, were meant for times of challenge, creativity where we don't know the outcome, and we need these times of stress interspersed with times of connection in a safe place. In other words, we were meant to go up and down and all around, over and beside and against challenges to get to the green meadow. The green pastures are not a permanent state. Those green meadows beside still waters with the shepherd are a necessary and important retreat to be restored after the inevitable challenges that life will give us, and before we go out to the difficult and distressing world again that is just beyond the meadow. Gabor Mate, a physician who specializes in trauma, has a quote, "If you hang around me for any length of time, you'll hear me say, safety is not the absence of threat, it is the presence of connection. When we are near the shepherd, we settle into green grass, not because in the meadow there's no threat at all, there can still be wild animals, but because the shepherd is near." David Rosmarin, out of Harvard Medical School, says that uncertainty does not cause anxiety. It's intolerance of uncertainty that causes anxiety. When we sit with a shepherd, the uncertainty, it absolutely continues, but we can tolerate it because of the safety we have when we sit with the shepherd. Let's move to verse 4, the second half of our text today. The NIV says, "He restores my soul." The Message says, "True to your word, you let me catch my breath." Dr. Bailey says that the literal translation is, "He brings me back." He brings me back. The concrete biblical image is the idea of a lost sheep. The shepherd is going out and looking for the lost sheep. The shepherd leaves the 99 to go get the one. The lost one that might realize it has wandered off alone, and it goes under a shrub or this rock outcropping, and it hides under there, and it bleats in terror, and it's vulnerable to a predator. Psalm 23 says the shepherd seeks out the sheep to bring it back. Often the lost sheep is too traumatized to walk and must be carried back to the flock. The shepherd goes to get the sheep back and literally puts it back on the right path, back onto the worn, narrow paths that ribbon the Palestine countryside, where the shepherd knows he can safely take his sheep. Unaided, the lost sheep cannot find its way home. The text here shows the importance of the shepherd in the sheep's restoration back to where it is safe and protected again. We live in a world that pulls us into frenetic action. Make more, spend more, buy more. You'll be able to rest when you make enough money to retire. You'll be popular enough when you buy this latest fashion or use that special product. It's impossible to keep up. The temptation to get pulled over here or over there and wander away from the shepherd is as tempting as a sheep going a little further to this sweet tuft of grass and that one and getting lost. Our culture invites us into a race that we can never win. Manufactured anxiety and distress to have the coolest clothes or the best dewy complexion is part of the game. And the game itself is rigged because we are invited to pursue this or that to feel better, but the pursuit itself results in anxiety and stress. The shepherd tracks us and longs to bring us back. It's not on us to do all the work. It's on us to allow the shepherd to bring us back. So listen to these words in all their profoundness. He settles me down in green pastures. He leads, he calls me beside still waters. He brings me back. The challenge of today's world is to stop the pursuit and allow ourselves to be settled in the silence of God's love. Lying down or settling down in green pastures isn't about running away from the world. It's about living in the middle of the action, knowing that the noise and the stress and the danger, they don't define us. We settle in the peace of the shepherd with the quiet and attuned listening to the voice. Lamentations, is a book written in the tension of God's presence in human suffering. It's written at that intersection. Read Lamentations from start to end. It's a dark book that's also a hopeful book. Listen to Lamentations 3. God proves to be good to the man who patiently waits, to the woman who diligently seeks. It's a good thing to quietly hope for help from God. It's a good thing when you're young to stick it out through the hard times. When life is heavy and hard to take, and we all know that, go off by yourself. Enter the silence. You can hear the voice of the shepherd there. Bow in prayer. Don't ask questions. You don't have to get so busy. Just wait for hope to appear. Our challenge is to remember that we, like sheep, are vulnerable. And we are always going to feel that vulnerability. But we also feel the safety that happens when we listen for the shepherd's voice and gather nearby, knowing that the shepherd settles us. Because safety is not the absence of danger. Neurobiologically, it's the presence of connection. In this noisy, busy world that calls us from 100 directions, the invitation is this: to sit in the quiet, to hear the shepherd's voice, the one that says, I love you. You matter. I delight in you. Let's do this together. So the last time I was at Bobo's house, after supper, just he and I went outside for that requisite busy activity after supper. And he and I, we played hide and seek, we threw sticks and we chased them, we played tag, we ran around for like 45 minutes, and then I gave him a 5-minute warning, and we ran around a little more, and then I told him it was time to go inside. And he instantly said, carry me. I suggested he might walk, because we actually had been just running around for like the better part of an hour. He disagreed. So I picked him up, and he snuggled into my arms. I brought him back. I brought him back toward the house. His cool cheek was next to mine. His little arms were wrapped around my neck. And it was one of those moments where a person thinks, I want to remember this moment and how it feels forever. And I just found myself asking him, can we be friends forever? And he instantly nodded. This is the call of the shepherd. Can we be friends forever? Can you sense him close? Do you feel it? That the shepherd is with you wherever you go. Listen, even this morning, I invite you to listen to what he says. Come to me. I am all you need. Come to me. I'm everything. Amen. Thank you.
We've got a few questions here. We live in an individualistic society. How do we use this passage and make it relevant for groups, church, family, society?
Well, that's really interesting because that book that was written about shepherding in the Middle East said what is really profound is it said, the Lord is my shepherd, he makes me lie down. And he said that the Middle Eastern ears would have perked up and said, like, I matter? Because they're so used to being in a flock all the time that they're sort of to know that the individual sheep matters would have been really important to that group, but it's in the context of knowing that the group is absolutely essential. And so as I was watching my sheep videos, I learned a couple of things about the sheep thing, where this one guy talked about how when he gets new sheep in his flock, they don't know his voice. And so when he calls, they wouldn't know to come, except that sheep kind of look around at the other sheep. And so when the shepherd calls and the other sheep go, they're like, okay, and they follow. And then over time, they get to know the shepherd's voice, right? That there's this beauty in being a part of a flock where you get like strength and security and knowledge and wisdom from the sheep around you. That was absolutely assumed in the psalm. And it's so in there that it doesn't even specifically say that because there's just an assumption that it's a group experience.
Right. Very cool. Okay, this one, and I think I'm allowed to read it. For someone who has a very difficult time settling down, what are some ways God helps you settle down when it's difficult? From your own son. Happy Mother's Day. I think if he wrote it in there, I'm allowed to say it.
Well, and it's funny that he asks that question because I don't know if he remembers, but he was a kid that was really hard to settle down. He was a really anxious kid. There was lots of dysregulation, and he and I spent a lot of time figuring out what it looked like to breathe deeply and to slow down and to figure out what's real and what's not real. I did some media training with Bob from Montreal this spring because I get nervous during live television interviews. And that's a problem when you're trying to think and you can't even think straight because you're so nervous, right? So he talked a lot about how we could get me into my body and get me to feel calmer. And so he talked about sitting on, he called them your seat bones. Us in the medical profession call them ischial tuberosities, where even right now, sit right on those two seat bones, like balance on them in this moment. Try it now. And instantly you engage your core in a way that isn't too anxious, but isn't too relaxed, that you get to be in this ready and relaxed position that gets you better able to answer questions. I thought that was really helpful. He said, go for long walks to burn off that energy before the interview. So I did that the last interview. I parked here, walked over to the television studio. That helped burn off some of that energy, right? And then he would say, and what's the biggest thing that can happen if you do a lousy television interview? And I'm like, I don't know, I guess people would not, no matter what, I know that Jim loves me, I know that God loves me, and if it's family supper night, they're just going to say, what's for dinner, right? Like, it doesn't really matter how bad, and so to sort of remember what's true and what's not true at the core is another way of managing that.
Yeah, well, thanks very much. Yeah, would you close our
Thanks.
gathering?
So, when life is heavy and hard to take, go off by yourself. Enter the silence, bow in prayer, and wait for hope to appear. So our prayer is to the Good Shepherd, God, that you would speak in the silence, that your voice would be heard, and that you would give the people in this room and that are watching online, that you would speak hope. God, I pray for your hope to appear in song, in prayer, in the voices and the lives of others whom we might come in contact with. Thank you for your hope. Amen. Have a good week.